Appaloosa Radio Online is pleased to offer an original audio drama. Sales Pitch is a brilliantly structured, chilling piece of contemporary dystopian horror. It transitions from a gentle twilight-years drama into a ruthless algorithmic trap. Instead of ghosts, demons, or witches, it uses today's very real horror of a corporate algorithm to ensnare its victims. Enjoy the story Sales Pitch. Appaloosa Radio Online is pleased to offer an original audio drama, Sales Pitch.
Golden soul, absolutely perfect for seniors.
Query return. Profile 84M. Name, Johnson, Harold Eugene. Age, 84. Occupation, insurance broker, retired. Location, Fox Hills, Ohio. Residence, homeowner. Estimated net annual income, $261,000. Marital status, married. Children, 2. Adult, both married. Military service, veteran, Vietnam. Education, Case Western University, business, 1970. Religion, St. Elizabeth's Catholic Church. Political affiliation, Republican. Interests, sports, golf, null, / outdoor, null. Note: restoring 1968 Shelby GT Mustang. Affiliations: Lions Club, Q-R, PT. Value: 872. Status: target value high. Begin recruitment process.
The algorithm accessed the local demographic server and pulled the file. It calculated the optimal intervention and decided to invite Mr. and Mrs. Hal Johnson to an afternoon tea dance at the newly renovated Golden Soul social and recreational location in Fox Hills. The invitation promised complimentary cocktails and dancing to a live band. The invitation arrived on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. It was elegant and understated, completely devoid of the glossy, staged photos of beaming retirees that usually accompanied timeshare pitches. There were no bold font testimonials promising a wonderful new life. Because it lacked those desperate marketing tactics, it didn't go immediately into Hal's recycling bin. Instead, he applied his usual fiscally conservative scrutiny to the brand. He discovered a rapidly growing chain of 52 facilities across the country. Carefully avoiding words like gym, spa, or senior center, Golden Soul explicitly billed itself as a location, a curated environment where peers could meet, dine, and yes, dance. It appeared entirely legitimate. He handed the card to Dorothy. She studied the script inviting them to a Thursday afternoon tea dance in mid-May. She murmured, tracing the embossed edge. That looks interesting. They hadn't been dancing in years. Their calendars were empty. And, most importantly to Hal's pragmatic mind, his preliminary research showed that a lifetime foundational membership actually cost less than the dues at their old country club. Not a bad trade-off, considering Hal never played golf. It might be worth an afternoon.
Golden soul, absolutely perfect for seniors.
The afternoon could not have been more perfect, though neither of them had expected it to be. If they were being honest, they hadn't even realized how wide the chasm between them had grown over the years. Their days had fallen into a quiet, parallel routine. Hal would retreat to the scent of motor oil and old leather in his garage, pouring his affection into restoring his classic Shelby GT Mustang. Dorothy would vanish into her sewing room, losing herself in the geometric precision of her quilting. They were comfortably coexisting, each doing their own thing with only a passing, minimal concern for the other. But then came the afternoon of the tea dance. The magic seemed to start the moment they crossed the threshold at 2 o'clock. As Dorothy smoothed her dress and Hal adjusted his collar, the woman working the registration table smiled warmly at them. "I can always tell a couple in love," she commented. Hal and Dorothy had exchanged a brief, surprised glance, a flush of color rising to Dorothy's cheeks. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at them and seen a romance. Once inside, that spark ignited into a flame. As the band struck up their first number, Hal offered his hand, and Dorothy took it. In that simple, familiar gesture, they rediscovered the absolute miracle of touch. It wasn't the casual brush of a shoulder in the kitchen, it was deliberate and electric. The warmth of another body pressed against theirs was stimulating, energizing. The years seemed to melt off them like spring snow. He was, with sudden and fierce clarity, a man again, and she was entirely his woman. There were 5 other couples scattered across the polished floor of the afternoon dance, but to Hal and Dorothy, the room was empty. They swirled and tangoed in a world of their own making, finding a rhythm they thought they had forgotten decades ago. Hal's breathing was smooth and deep. He never once reached for the pocket nebulizer weighing down his jacket. Dorothy's chest felt light and free, without the slightest flutter that usually required one of her tiny purple pills. All they felt was the music, the movement, and each other. It was as if the band had somehow tapped into their souls, reading their long-forgotten memories. Every song the brass section belted out, every sweeping string melody, was one of their all-time favorites. The tunes resonated within them, carrying them back to their youth. Though the sun had been shining brightly when they arrived, the dim, amber lighting of the dance hall wrapped around them like a blanket, making it feel like the breathless anticipation of New Year's Eve. It was a wonderful, warm evening suspended in the middle of the afternoon, the air heavy and sweet with Polynesian aromas of coconut and blooming hibiscus. For the first time in years, they weren't just passing time, they were living it. What neither realized was how perfectly the algorithm had curated the music, the ambient lighting, and even the staff's conversational scripts to perfectly match Hal and Dorothy's psychological profiles. Of course, the algorithm had no desire for them to know. The phone rang just as Hal was pouring his second cup of morning coffee. "Hello, Mr. Johnson. This is Monica from Golden Soul. A cheerful voice chirped through the receiver. "We were wondering if you might consider joining us full-time. After seeing you and your wife at the tea dance, I believe our locations offer the kind of social and recreational benefits active folks like you are looking for." Hal leaned against the kitchen counter, catching Dorothy's eye across the room. She paused her cross-stitching, lifting a curious eyebrow. "I thought you might be calling soon," Hal said, a slight smile touching his lips. "No pressure at all, Mr. Johnson. We're just inquiring." "I saw on your website that you have a lifetime foundational membership rate," Hal noted, pulling out a kitchen chair and sitting down. "Yes, we do. And because our Fox Hills location is completely new, we are currently offering a special discounted rate for our founding members. It brings the lifetime cost down another 10%. Hal covered the receiver for a second. "Golden Soul," he mouthed to Dorothy. Her eyes lit up, and she gave him an enthusiastic, rapid nod. "Send me the contract," Hal said, uncovering the phone. "We'll look it over." "Certainly. We use City Courier, so they can have the paperwork delivered to your door this afternoon." "We'll look forward to getting it." "Most certainly, Mr. Johnson. We are always here to help." True to Monica's word, a thick manila envelope arrived just after lunch. Hal sat at the dining room table, his reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, and reviewed the contract carefully. He read through the legalese, expecting a catch, but it was surprisingly standard. He looked it over a couple more times, just to be absolutely sure, then slid the paperwork across the table to Dorothy. They didn't need to deliberate long. The memory of the music, the dancing, and the way they had felt in each other's arms was all the convincing they needed. They signed their names on the dotted lines. A week later, the newly refurbished Fox Hills Golden Soul location was buzzing with energy. The staff had gone all out, hosting a wonderful welcome aboard party for the Johnsons. As Hal and Dorothy walked through the double doors, greeted by smiling faces and the clinking of glasses, they held hands, ready for whatever this new adventure had in store.
Golden soul, absolutely perfect for seniors.
The air inside Golden Soul always smelled faintly of citrus and eucalyptus, invigorating yet deeply calming. For Hal and Dorothy Johnson, stepping through the glass double doors had become the highlight of their week. It wasn't just the pristine facilities, it was the way the atmosphere itself seemed to lift the years from their shoulders. "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson," chirped a young man in a crisp polo shirt at the concierge desk, his smile as bright as the atrium skylight. "I can tell from your brisk, decisive walk that all is going well for you. Keep up the good work." Hal straightened his posture, pulling his shoulders back a fraction of an inch. "Thank you, Kevin. Feeling quite spry today." Further down the hall, passing the juice bar, one of the fitness instructors paused, lowering her clipboard. "Mr. Johnson, I have a personal question for you if you don't mind. Have you lost weight? Maybe something like 20 pounds? Looking good." Hal chuckled, instinctively patting his stomach. "And I hear you play a pretty mean hand of mahjong," she added, her eyes crinkling warmly. 20 games in a row. Maybe a new club record." Dorothy linked her arm through her husband's, beaming at his flush of pride. Before they could take another step, the activities director caught Dorothy's eye. "Mrs. Johnson, I've always wanted to learn to quilt. Maybe you could lead a quilting group for us." "Oh, I'd be absolutely delighted," Dorothy said, standing a little taller herself. They felt seen, valued, important. It was a stark contrast to the invisible cloak of aging that seemed to settle over them everywhere else in the world. Buoyed by the interactions, they made their way to the West Wing for their scheduled wellness assessment. Billed as a complimentary perk of their membership, they had half expected the usual clinical gauntlet of cold stethoscopes, harsh fluorescents, and crinkling paper table covers. Instead, the consultation room looked more like a private lounge. Soft, ambient lighting bathed the room, and plush armchairs sat opposite a polished, uncluttered desk. State-of-the-art biometric scanners sat in the periphery, humming with a quiet, sleek efficiency. Their designated holistic practitioner, a man named Silas, didn't enter the room staring at a screen or typing furiously into a laptop. He simply sat down in the armchair across from them, folded his hands loosely in his lap, and offered a warm, steady smile. "Hal, Dorothy," Silas said, his voice a soothing, unhurried baritone. "There's no rush today. We have all the time we need." Dorothy thought briefly of her regular doctor back home, an overworked blur of a woman who usually spent their 7-minute appointments sighing at a tablet, one hand already on the doorknob. Silas, by contrast, was an anchor of calm. He didn't just hear them, he listened. As Hal described the lingering stiffness in his joints, Silas maintained absolute eye contact, validating every word without once glancing at the clock. The screening itself felt less like a clinical exam and more like a seamless blend of a luxury spa treatment and space-age technology. Silas guided Hal and Dorothy through a series of painless biometric scans, the sleek peripheral machines humming a soothing low note as they measured everything from bone density to cellular hydration. Instead of harsh needles, a warm, soft patch briefly rested on their arms to collect a microscopic blood sample. Throughout it all, the room remained tranquil, completely devoid of the sterile anxiety that normally accompanied a doctor's visit. When the gentle hum of the scanners finally quieted, Silas and a fellow holistic doctor sat close by, reviewing Hal and Dorothy's plastic pill bottles with sympathetic clicks of their tongues. There was no judgment in their eyes, only a profound, sorrowful concern for the chemical burden the couple had been carrying. Leaning in like trusted friends, they pitched the Golden Soul Vitality Regimen, a vibrant, proprietary line of organic, cold-pressed juices tailored entirely to their unique DNA. With warm smiles and reassuring hands rested on their shoulders, Hal and Dorothy were gently encouraged to slowly replace those harsh, toxic pharmaceuticals with these pure, natural alternatives.
System log / Almic protocol Golden Soul Engagement Maximization / Cohort 14-day assessment. Target assets: Johnson, Harold Eugene, demographic code 84-M / Johnson, Dorothy Exum, demographic code 82-F. Baseline metric: on-site retention currently operating at 41.2 hours per week. Optimization directive: plus 100% retention variance. Target threshold: greater than 82.4 hours per week. Behavioral anomaly: recurring engagement deficit isolated to Thursday morning cycle. Cross-referenced scheduling confirms external affiliation conflict. Designation: Lions Club. Strategic intervention: deploy targeted high dopamine stimulus during identified deficit window. Objective: override external affiliation parameters, neutralize off-site departure impulses, and enforce on-site retention via positive reinforcement pathways. Case file narrative: Harold Eugene Johnson, aged 84, and Dorothy Exum Johnson, aged 82. These new inductees seem to be adapting well to the Golden Soul amenities and are responsive to the suggestions of staff. They are increasing the amount of time they use Golden Soul amenities. At this evaluation, they are on site an average of 41.2 hours each week. Our goal remains to have them on site at least double that amount. Analysis of pertinent time cycle data show that they are not using the Golden Soul amenities on Thursdays. An internet search reveals that the Fox Hills Morning Lions Club meets on Thursday mornings. We believe that Harold Eugene Johnson spends his Thursday mornings attending those club meetings. An intermediate goal should be creating positive experiences for H.E. Johnson on Thursday mornings so that he forgoes attending those club meetings.
The algorithm completed its 2-week assessment on the new asset cohort. The assessment concluded, an intermediate goal should be creating positive experiences for H.E. Johnson on Thursday mornings so that he forgoes attending the Lions Club meetings. At the Wednesday afternoon Pilates class, an attractive woman patted Hal on his rear and with a wink said, "I certainly hope that you can join me for our Thursday morning sensual training class." Hal Johnson never went to another Lions Club meeting.
absolutely perfect for seniors.
Hi, I'm Tracy. After suffering the incredible loss of my husband, I discovered Golden Sol and its miraculous array of healing strategies. As a French Canadian, I love connecting with people. Come join my class, and maybe we can even speak a little French together.
Golden Sol, absolutely perfect for seniors.
Hi, I'm Tracy. After suffering the incredible loss of my husband, I discovered Golden Sol and its miraculous array of healing strategies. As a French Canadian, I love connecting with people. Come join my class, and maybe we can even speak a little French together.
The lobby's interactive video display featured a glowing portrait of Tracy Marsh. Hal immediately noticed she spelled it with an I, not a Y. Beneath her name, her title read, Associate Instructor, Awakening Your Senses to the Infinite Glories. Bunch of hippie nonsense, Hal muttered to himself. The screen shifted to a brief promotional video. Tracy appeared, looking earnest and bright. Hi, I'm Tracy. After suffering the incredible loss of my husband, I discovered Golden Sol and its miraculous array of healing strategies. As a French Canadian, I love connecting with people. Come join my class, and maybe we can even speak a little French together. Hal gave a gruff, half-snort of dismissal. Still, she had an engaging smile, one that seemed aimed right at him, warm and particularly welcoming. Screwing up his courage, he squared his shoulders and marched briskly down the hallway, falling back into a familiar military cadence. The Zen Den was tucked away in a quiet corner of the Golden Sol complex, near the waterfall behind the rose gardens. Unlike the bright, sterile functionality of the gym, this room was dim, illuminated only by recessed, warm amber lighting. A complex scent hung in the air, musky sandalwood layered with a slight sweetness of lavender. Hal had smelled patchouli once at a protest outside the base in '69, and he recognized a hint of that earthy aroma too. It made his stomach tighten with an old, familiar irritation, but the rest of the atmosphere was surprisingly soothing. Soft, low-frequency music, more like a pulse than a melody, resonated in the floorboards. 5 other residents, all women, were scattered on thick, velvet-textured mats. Hal felt a flash of self-consciousness, the only man in the room, but Tracy didn't give him time to dwell on it. She was dressed in loose, flowing layers of heather gray fabric that obscured the specific lines of her body, but hinted at vitality and grace. To Hal, who had spent decades in the crisp uniform of the military and then business suits, the sheer lack of structure in her clothing was almost scandalous. "Welcome, Hal," she said, her voice a low, throaty purr with that distinct French-Canadian lilt. She didn't smile, but her eyes, dark and expressive, locked onto his and held them. "You are brave to join us. Courage is required for this work." The class began simply enough. Tracy had them sit cross-legged, eyes closed, focusing on deep, slow breaths. "Feel the air," she commanded softly. "Do not just take it in. Taste it. Feel how it strokes the inside of your nose, the back of your throat. It is the first gift of the world, and we take it for granted." Hal, who usually treated breathing as an autonomic necessity, found himself trying. The air was thick with scent, and as he focused, he felt the cool inflow against his upper lip. He felt focused, present. Then came the partnered exercise. "To understand connection, we must first learn receptivity," Tracy announced. She scanned the small group, and Hal's heart gave an uncomfortable thump. He hoped she would pair him with Mrs. Gable, the safe, frail grandmother from the dining hall. But Tracy walked directly to him. "Hal, if you allow, I will demonstrate with you." He was a retired executive. He knew how to manage social pressures. He nodded, trying to appear nonchalant. "Of course." Tracy instructed him to sit on the mat with his back rigid. Then she settled in behind him. The initial shock was the heat. Her back pressed firmly against his, the warmth of her body seeping through his thin Golden Sol polo shirt. The contrast was immediate and disarming. Hal was 84. He knew the specific, comfortable familiarity of Dorothy's aging body, the prominent curve of her spine, the coolness of her skin. Tracy was different. She felt alive in a way he hadn't considered. Her body felt robust, taut, and radiating a vitality that made his own old bones feel suddenly brittle. "We will sync our breaths," Tracy instructed, her voice near his ear, sending a strange shiver down his neck. "I want you to feel my ribs expand, and then you expand yours into me. Trust my rhythm." He tried to resist, to maintain a rigid military posture, to create a boundary. But she pressed back, forcing him to engage. Inhale. He felt her lungs expand against his back. It was a firm, living pressure. He was forced to lean into her to keep his balance. Exhale. She compressed, and he naturally fell back a centimeter, his back now fully supported by hers. For 10 minutes, they sat like that, breathing in concert. The scent of her, the lavender and sandalwood, mixed now with a faint, clean musk of sweat, was intoxicating. With every inhalation she took, he felt her ribcage glide against his shoulder blades. It wasn't sexual, not yet, but it was an intimacy so raw and complete that it terrified him. He felt like he was sharing the most fundamental part of life with a stranger. When Tracy finally instructed them to separate, Hal felt a strange sense of loss. He was suddenly cold. The class ended with each resident alone again, simply touching different textures, silks and wools. But Hal didn't see the fabrics. He sat on his mat, his hands resting on his knees, still feeling the echo of Tracy's back against his, the ghostly imprint of a strange woman's heartbeat synchronized with his own. He was completely aroused, a sensation he hadn't felt with that kind of intense, raw urgency in years. As he was leaving, Tracy stepped beside him and put her hand gently, yet firmly, on his arm. "Your breath is very strong, Hal," she said, looking up at him. "But you hold it. You are afraid of the world's touch. Come back next Thursday. We will work on letting the walls crack." Hal walked back to his car in a daze. He felt a profound sense of loyalty to Dorothy. He loved her with every fiber of his stable, predictable being. They were high school sweethearts, a lifelong partner. He didn't want to do anything inappropriate. Yet, the memory of that connection, that intense, living heat, was like a drug he had just been introduced to. And the Golden Soul algorithm, tracking his biometrics, noted the spike in his excitement and the immediate update in his schedule. Hal Johnson will no longer be attending the Lions Club. The algorithm completed its quarterly revenue optimization protocol analysis for location number 44, Fox Hills, Ohio, and sent a priority message to the executive committee.
Automated system override. Priority escalation to Executive Committee, Direct Routing. CC, Office of the CEO, W. Presley. From Core Algorithm, Revenue Optimization Subroutine. Subject, Action Required. Location number 44, Fox Hills, Ohio. Sovereign Tier Extraction. Quarterly Return on Investment, ROI Analysis. Location number 44. Q2 revenues for location number 44 have significantly flattened, growth less than 0.143%, and represent a calculated threat to annual corporate return on investment goals. While the recruitment metric remains stable, plus 0.761, the asset extraction metric is critically low, plus 0.181. Microanalysis of member actions displays a demographic locked into a meet, dine, and dance complacency loop. Standard marketing funnels and local management interventions have failed to trigger major capital events. Protocol over-initiated. Granular filtering indicates severe underutilization of memberships possessing a QRPT value greater than 800. A primary target has been isolated within the location number 44 cadre to serve as an extraction model. Target: Johnson Harold Eugene, demographic code 84-M. Financial profile: confirmed Q-RPT value of 872. Highly liquid, untapped equity detected. Status: Phase 1 isolation successful. Subject has been detached from external affiliations, Lions Club, via targeted physiological/emotional stimulus. Instructor, Marche, T. Subject is primed for accelerated extraction. Action directive. Elevate Subject Johnson to sovereign tier status. Initiate immediate face-to-face acceleration with CEO Warren Presley. To maximize psychological leverage, exploit subject's executive ego, and ensure total environmental control during the pitch. The meeting will be conducted off-site. Venue assignment: Corporate Aircraft, Presley 1.
Dorothy had not been feeling well since she stopped her traditional medications and replaced them with the Golden Soul Vitality regimen. The daily deliveries of cold-pressed, turmeric-infused juices and the handfuls of herbal supplements tailored to her specific DNA protocol were simply no substitute for her actual pharmacy prescriptions. Even when Hal had enthusiastically agreed to upgrade her to the much more expensive Premium Wellness Platinum level, which added weekly vitamin IV drips and localized magnetic therapy, the effects were only a fleeting illusion of wellness. She still loved coming to the Fox Hills location for Tuesday night dinners and cards with her friends, but she no longer had the stamina to join them on the ballroom floor. Instead, while Hal was blooming with an almost aggressive new energy, his posture straighter, his voice louder, his mind clearly preoccupied with the new techniques he was learning in Tracy's class, Dorothy sat watching from the sidelines, nursing a cup of tepid green tea. She felt as though she were fading, becoming translucent, while her husband was suddenly painted in bold, saturated colors. So, when the call came through on Hal's phone that Thursday evening, the contrast in their reactions was stark. The voice on the other end belonged to Liam Nobley, the sharply dressed general manager of the Fox Hills location. Nobley's tone was hushed and deferential, speaking of exclusive top-tier opportunities and executive-level consultations. The call both surprised and exhilarated Hal. He paced the living room, his chest puffing out with the forgotten pride of his old insurance broker days. But from her armchair, wrapped in an afghan to ward off a persistent, deep-seated chill, Dorothy just didn't understand why he was so excited. Almost immediately, Hal decided he needed a new suit. A meeting with Warren Presley demanded it. The off-the-rack suits from his working days would no longer match his elevated status. Historically, there was nothing Hal Johnson hated more than buying clothing. Yet, as he prepared for the meeting, he practically skipped through the city's finest men's stores, gleefully trying on different styles and modern cuts. He took mirror selfies of the ones he liked best, but he didn't text the photos to Dorothy. He sent them to Tracy. When she replied with a heart emoji for the Italian silk, navy gray pinstripe, it was the one he bought without checking the price tag. To complete the image, he decided he couldn't just take a cab to the private airstrip. He would drive the classic Mustang, the one he had spent the better part of his retirement restoring to pristine condition, to meet Mr. Presley. From her recliner chair in the living room, Dorothy pulled her Afghan tighter around her shoulders. She looked small, almost fragile, holding a tumbler of miracle green juice. "Hal," she called out, her voice thin and tired. "I still don't understand. Why does the president of the company want to see you at this hour? At a private airport?" Hal paused in the archway. He looked at his wife, truly looked at her, and saw only a fading ghost. She was tethered to the past, entirely content in her decline. There was no way to explain the sovereign tear to her, or the sheer, intoxicating momentum of what was happening to him. She wouldn't understand it anyway. Instead of answering, he crossed the room, leaned down, and pressed a brief, perfunctory kiss to her forehead. "Don't wait up, love," he said smoothly. He turned and walked out the front door, letting it click shut firmly behind him. The transition from the windy, fuel-scented tarmac to the interior of Presley 1 was like stepping into a vacuum-sealed vault. The heavy cabin door clicked shut behind Hal with a solid pneumatic thud, instantly severing him from the outside world. Inside, the Gulfstream G650ER smelled of ozone, aged cedar, and impossibly expensive leather. Warren Presley didn't stand up like a regional manager greeting a customer. Instead, he remained seated in one of the plush, rearward-facing captain's chairs, a heavy crystal tumbler resting on his knee. He was far younger than Hal, perhaps late 40s, but he possessed a predatory stillness that commanded the space. Presley's eyes drifted from the window to Hal, taking in the navy and gray pinstripe suit. A slow, approving smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Is that a classic 1968 Shelby GT Mustang down there on the apron?" Presley asked, his voice a smooth, gravelly baritone that barely had to compete with the hum of the jet's auxiliary power. Hal's chest swelled against the Italian silk. "Good eye. Restored her myself. Took the better part of 3 years to get the original factory specifications exactly right." "It shows," Presley said, gesturing to the empty leather seat across from him. "Most men your age settle for buying a Porsche off the lot. It takes a specific kind of drive to strip something down to the chassis and rebuild it better than it was. Please, have a seat, Harold. Or do you prefer Hal?" "Hal is fine," he said, sinking into the buttery leather. It contoured to his back perfectly. He felt a brief, distant pang of guilt thinking of Dorothy shivering in her armchair back home, but it was quickly swallowed by the sheer, intoxicating altitude of the moment. He belonged here. Presley leaned forward, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid from an unbranded decanter into a second crystal glass. He slid it across the polished, burled walnut table. "I'll be frank with you, Hal. I don't usually pull members out of the regional locations for a one-on-one. The algorithm flags 1,000 files a day, and frankly, 99% of them bore me." Presley took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving Hal's. "They're retirees. They're content. They want to drink green tea, play cards, and wait for the clock to run out." Hal scoffed softly, picking up his glass. "The meet, dine, and dance crowd." "Exactly," Presley said, his smile widening slightly. He pointed a finger at Hal. "But I looked at your file, Hal. I looked at your career in insurance brokering. You didn't just sell policies, you calculated risk. You understood equity. You built a life by outmaneuvering the market." The jet engines began to whine, a deep, resonant vibration that Hal felt in the soles of his custom leather shoes. "Tracy tells me you're outperforming men 20 years your junior in the biomechanics sessions," Presley continued, leaning back as the plane began its taxi. "You're experiencing a resurgence, a second act. You've outgrown the platinum level, Hal. It's too small for you now. That's why I brought you on my plane. I wanted to talk to a peer about the sovereign tier." Hal took a sip of the scotch. It burned beautifully all the way down. "I'm listening, Warren." The G650ER surged down the runway. Hal felt the raw, localized gravity press him deep into the leather seat as the nose lifted. The physical sensation of leaving the earth felt like a graduation. Presley waited until they reached cruising altitude, the cabin leveling out into a silent, smooth glide, before he brought out the tablet. It was thin, framed in brushed titanium, and he slid it across the walnut table next to Hal's scotch. The platinum level, as you've experienced, is about maintenance, Presley said, leaning back and steeping his fingers. It keeps the engine running. But the sovereign tier, Hal, sovereign is about evolution. It's a total biocellular rewrite, coupled with aggressive financial positioning. It's for men who aren't looking to fade comfortably, but to conquer their final quadrant. Hal picked up the tablet. The screen bloomed to life, displaying a sleek, personalized dashboard. Under a rotating gold crest, it read, Harold E. Johnson, Sovereign Ascension Profile. It includes private access to the off-grid longevity clinics in Geneva, Presley continued, his voice smooth and hypnotic. Proprietary cognitive enhancers. And of course, Tier 1 priority booking with our elite instructional staff. Tracy, for instance, only works with Sovereign members moving forward. We simply can't waste her time on the general population. Hal felt a cold spike of panic at the thought of losing Tracy, losing the energy, the attention, the way she made him feel like a man in his prime. He looked down at the tablet, his eyes scanning past the benefits to the bottom line. The old insurance broker in him automatically parsed the numbers. His breath hitched. Warren, this is... Hal tapped the screen, his polished fingernail clicking against the glass. This isn't a membership fee. This is a complete portfolio liquidation. You're talking about the equity in the house, the primary annuities. That's my entire safety net. Presley didn't blink. He didn't offer a payment plan or a discount. He took a slow sip of his scotch. A safety net, Presley repeated, letting the words hang in the silent cabin. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tell me, Hal, when you were closing million-dollar corporate policies in your 30s, did you do it by worrying about a safety net? Or did you do it by recognizing a profound opportunity and seizing it? Hal shifted in his seat. This is different. Dorothy's medical bills. Dorothy, Presley interrupted smoothly, is fading. You see it. I see it. Our predictive analytics see it. She is comfortable in her decline. But look at you. Presley gestured to Hal's chest, the Italian silk. You are practically radiating new life. Are you really going to tether your second act to a sinking ship? Hal's jaw tightened. It was a brutal thing to say, but the ugly secret part of Hal, the part that had bought the suit and texted Tracy, thrilled at the validation. The men in the sovereign tier don't hold on to stagnant equity, Presley said, leaning in closer, the scent of expensive cedar and predatory intent filling Hal's space. They leverage it into power, into time, into themselves. But I might have misjudged the algorithm. Presley reached across the table, his hand hovering over the tablet. If you want to go back to Fox Hills, sit in the armchair and wait for the end with the rest of the herd. I'll have the pilot turn us around right now. No hard feelings, Hal. It takes a certain caliber of man to step into the sovereign circle. Presley's fingers brushed the edge of the titanium frame, ready to pull the offer away. Hal stared at the titanium frame tablet. The screen cast a faint, cool glow against the warm amber of his scotch. He could feel the deep, thrumming vibration of the Gulfstream's engines radiating through the floorboards and into his bones, a sensation of pure, unstoppable forward momentum. He thought of Dorothy, wrapped in her Afghan, sipping tepid green tea in the dim light of their living room, a fading ghost. Then he thought of the navy pinstripe suit he was wearing, the heart emoji on his phone, the way his muscles felt after a session with Tracy. He was a man rebuilt, a man who refused to be left behind to rust. Hal reached out and caught Presley's wrist before he could pull the tablet away. "I didn't say turn the plane around, Warren," Hal said, his voice dropping an octave, trying to match the CEO's commanding presence. Presley stopped. He didn't smile, but a subtle tension released from his shoulders. He slowly slid his hand back, leaving the tablet entirely in Hal's domain. "Then claim your quadrant, Hal," Presley murmured. "Authorize the transfer." Hal pressed his thumb against the biometric sensor at the bottom of the screen. A digital reticle spun, scanning his print. Processing. For 3 seconds, the only sound in the cabin was the whisper of the ventilation system. Then, the tablet emitted a sharp, clinical ping. The screen flashed a brilliant white, followed by a stark, minimalist confirmation page. Sovereign protocol, accepted. Funds secured. The moment the screen shifted, the atmosphere in the cabin snapped. It was as if someone had thrown a silent switch, sucking the warmth out of the pressurized air. Presley picked up his glass, finished his scotch in one pragmatic swallow, and set it down. When he looked back at Hal, the predatory camaraderie was entirely gone. His eyes were flat, efficient, and thoroughly disinterested. "Excellent. The central system has logged the optimization," Presley said. His voice had lost its gravelly warmth. It was now brisk and technical, the tone of an administrator ticking a box. "Your primary annuities and home equity have been liquidated and transferred to the Sovereign Holding Trust. Your digital badge will update by the time we land." Hal blinked, suddenly feeling the collar of his new suit pinching his neck. "Wait, land? We just got up here. I thought we were going to discuss the Geneva clinics. The proprietary, all necessary literature will be forwarded to your personal device," Presley interrupted, reaching into the compartment beside his seat. He pulled out a sleek silver laptop and opened it. The glow of a spreadsheet illuminated his face, rendering him pale and statuesque. "Your local manager, Liam Nobley, will handle the ground-level logistics of your new tier, including your wife's localized magnetic therapy schedule." "But Tracy," Hal stammered, his fingers leaving smears of sweat on the edge of the tablet. Presley finally paused his typing, his eyes flicking up with a look of genuine, sterile pity. "Tracy? Harold, her name is Chloe. She's an actress from Cleveland, not a widow from Quebec. The algorithm flagged your demographic's vulnerability to foreign accents and the spiritual seeker archetype. It was a tailored behavioral intervention, and frankly, a very standard one. Her schedule with other sovereign prospects is fully booked." He tapped a key. Above them, the seatbelt sign chimed with a harsh, synthetic double note. We're beginning our descent back to Fox Hills. Hal sat frozen. The heavy crystal tumbler in his hand felt absurdly cold. He looked out the window, but there was nothing to see but the dark, featureless void of the night sky. He had just handed over everything he owned, the entirety of his life's safety net, and the man across from him was already answering emails. The G650ER banked sharply, initiating a steep descent that made Hal's stomach rise into his throat. Across the walnut table, Presley remained silently illuminated by the silver glow of his screen, his fingers flying across the keys with dismissive speed. For the next 30 minutes, the only sound was the suffocating hum of the ventilation system and the faint clinking of ice melting in Hal's empty crystal glass. Every foot they dropped in altitude felt like the crushing weight of a collapsing lung. By the time the landing gear deployed with a heavy mechanical thud, the intoxicating illusion of the sovereignty had completely evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hollow vacuum. Hal Johnson, confirmed QRPT value of 872, was now empty, flying in a multi-million-dollar jet back to a wife he had just betrayed, feeling smaller than he had in his entire life.
Tracy. Harold, her name is Chloe. She's an actress from Cleveland, not a widow from Quebec. The algorithm flagged her demographics' vulnerability to foreign accents and the spiritual seeker archetype. It was a tailored behavioral intervention, and frankly, a very standard one.
The walk from the private tarmac back to the visitor's lot was a blur of freezing Ohio wind. Hal's Italian silk suit, which had felt like the armor of a conqueror an hour ago, was paper-thin against the night air. When he slid into the driver's seat of the '68 Shelby GT Fastback, the restored vintage leather didn't embrace him. It was stiff and ice-cold. He turned the ignition. The massive V8 engine roared to life, a guttural, mechanical scream that shook the chassis. It was a sound he used to love, a testament to his own ability to rebuild and revive. Now, it just sounded like a trapped animal. Hal didn't remember merging onto the interstate. He only registered the hypnotic blur of the dashed yellow lines and the heavy, numb weight of his foot burying the accelerator into the floorboards. 80 miles per hour. The wind noise began to howl around the hardtop. He thought of Liam Nobley's deferential voice on the phone. An elite sanctuary for visionaries. 100. The Shelby GT Mustang vibrated violently, the suspension fighting the uneven concrete. He pictured the minimalist white screen of the titanium tablet. Sovereign protocol accepted. Funds secured. He had signed away the house. He had traded Dorothy's final years of comfort, her safety net, for a younger man's approving nod and the pathetic illusion of Tracy's smile. 120. He began weaving in and out of the late-night traffic. The headlights of the cars he swerved around were nothing but sudden, violent streaks of white. Horns blared, Doppler shifting into silence behind him. He gripped the wooden steering wheel until his knuckles ached, his breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. He couldn't go back to Fox Hills. He couldn't walk through his own front door, look at his wife shivering under her Afghan, and tell her there was nothing left. The insurance broker had been perfectly, flawlessly outmaneuvered. He was just another extracted asset. The speedometer needle buried itself past the 140 miles per hour mark, trembling against the physical limit of the gauge, hell-bent and howling. Up ahead, the skeletal steel arches of the interstate bridge loomed against the starless sky. Beneath it, the black, muddy expanse of the river waited, indifferent and cold. Hal didn't brake. As the fastback hit the concrete of the bridge deck, the chaotic noise in his head finally went dead silent. It wasn't an accident. It was the final, inevitable calculation. He tightened his grip, closed his eyes against the rushing dark, and jerked the wheel sharply to the right. The heavy American steel tore through the guardrail in a deafening explosion of shattering glass and shearing metal. For one terrible, weightless second, the Mustang hung suspended in the freezing air above the river before plunging into the black water below. There would be no reported survivors. Miles away, deep within a silent, climate-controlled server room, the algorithm processed the nightly data sync.
Action. Liquidate asset. Target 84M H.E. Johnson, location number 44, Fox Hills, Ohio. Flag. All accounts as closed. Liability extraction 0.0. No lingering liability. Action. Close record. Open next sequential record.
Golden soul, absolutely perfect for seniors.